Hello.
Yeah, we'll see if more people join today.
Yeah, that'll be good. I noticed that somebody has been updating the meeting notes for today.
Ah, I haven't seen that.
Hello.
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 Hello, Shruti. Thanks for joining today. Shall we wait another minute to see if someone else is joining? Okay. So I guess we can get started. Can folks still hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Great. I took the liberty of putting a bunch of things on the HackMD document, the agenda for today. Yeah, but feel free to point out if there is something that you'd like to discuss first. Or I missed at the previous meeting, so I know there was a discussion about generating the code, so I included one point of that as well. maybe I should share the. Okay, I'll just go ahead. Feel free to stop me if I'm not making sense. Okay, the first thing I wanted to mention, I guess everyone here already knows, is that we picked the name for the protocols. It's CD events, and the DNS name though is still not defined. So we have CD events or event CD. And yeah, so we need to check which one is available and which not. And we asked the CDF for help with that.
Is this CD, is the DNS, is that one the one you type in the browser?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Because the events in themselves usually have reverse CDS, right? DNS, right?
Yes, on the cloud event binding, the event type should be a reverse DNS. So in that sense, I think events.cd would be my favorite. Hi, Steve.
And from what I remember, Andre, I think that was the one that was events.cd was the one that was available.
Yeah.
From what we could tell, that had the best luck for us to grab.
Event.cd.
So stupid question there would be, would people think this is like events, happenings in this CD domain? Or do they want to use that for kind of like those type of events, summits and so on?
There is a non-zero chance for that, but I guess that would be more like cd.events, because events is the TLD for dealing with those kind of things, I guess.
Yeah, there's always a chance that you're going to get some overlap. The domain names that are out there we're running out of them. Basically, the creativity that you have to get very creative these days.
We could, of course, as a parallel track, just develop a standard for how to hold like conferences and things like that in the CD area, and then we can be both. But let's focus on the messaging for now.
Yeah, that's how we'll make our money, by hosting events.
Maybe. Cool. But yeah, so we brought it up to the CDF TOC. And yeah, I think Steve, you mentioned that we don't want to do double work and buy a domain and someone names and then have to transfer it to the CDF. So hopefully we can get help from them to get this registered by the CDF directly or the Linux Foundation, or it is. Yeah, and once we have the domain, we should probably update our documentation and SDK and everything, but maybe we can wait until we have a finalized DNS name. But
And one thing on once we get the domain name and we want to stand up a basic website along underneath that, I would recommend using Hugo and Doxy as the markdown. We use that for Ortelius, and it works really nice to be able to do pull requests and that type of thing without dealing with WordPress plugins and things like that. That just is a simpler way to have community collaboration on the site.
yeah, absolutely. So we use similar approach for Tecton. We have Hugo and Doxy and Netlify accounts. I think it's a community version and it works pretty well. So We have a new GitHub org, which is called CD events. And we asked the CDF also for help with the logo design. It'd be nice to have a nice logo. And they sent back a creative brief, which is this Google Doc. And I started putting something on it, and I think someone else added ideas, but feel free to contribute to it. I think once we feel we have a satisfactory status, we'll send it to the CDF, and I guess it's an iterative process. So maybe they propose some ideas and they say, yeah, this direction looks good, this doesn't, and continue from there. Okay. Anything else on the name? Right. Next, I wanted to briefly talk about the relocation to the CD events org. I guess we created the org on a GitHub. We kind of assume GitHub is the hosting service. Just wanted to put the question there. We want to use GitHub or GitLab or else, or both, as some kind of replication mechanism in place. I think GitHub is good for at least for a starting point. Just wanted to ask if anyone had any concern.
I would just stick with GitHub since that's what most of the CDF projects are under.
Right. Yeah.
Just to be consistent.
I agree. Yeah. It feels a bit weird if we are using GitHub for the rest of our stuff that we actually use GitLab for one thing. If it wasn't kind of a transition over to it.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. With that out of the way, so in terms of repos, my recommendation would be to kind of follow what cloud events do, which I think looks nice and makes sense. So to have like a spec document, which would map what we have in the vocabulary draft folder in our SIG events. So we basically holds the spec there. We could use a spec repo for other documents like a community ND or governance ND as well. Or we could create a community repo if you want to. And then we could have SDK-star repos for the various SDKs. And eventually could have one repo for the website hosting containing basically doxy and whatever documentation we want to put there.
Yeah, that sounds good. One question on the license. Does anybody mind if we just use Apache 2 for everything?
That would work for me. I think it's we had this discussion before for the SIG events repo, and I think most of the places Apache 2 is used, and I think for consistency it makes sense to use Apache 2, unless anyone is concerned.
Sounds good.
Yeah, sounds good.
I just know when you start creating repos, that's one of the things we got to make sure we just drop in there.
Yeah. All right, good point. For the POC, that's a folder in the SIG events repo. I thought maybe it would make sense to have one repo with all the POCs, or one repo per POC in the new org. I don't know, or you could leave it in the SIG events. Yeah, so my favorite approach, I guess, would be to have one repo, at least one repo in that new org, so that it goes along with the rest of the CD events code.
Yeah, I think the one repo would work best, because then you can have the README kind of explain what's in the repo and where to find things instead of jumping around to different repos.
How does Cloud Events do this? Do they have any?
No, they don't.
Like
they don't have any POC type of repo in the org.
We could have, I don't know if it's a good idea, but we could have something called experimental, for example, where we put all the experimental stuff. What were you doing?
Yeah.
Did we also discuss having an experimental concept for the specification itself? I know we discussed something like that, but I don't remember exactly what, just so we don't use the name if we also want to use it for experimental extensions to the specification.
I think on that, when we talk about the spec itself, that we would, instead of being experimental, I think that would be kind of more slated as a draft or, you know, version, you know, 0.1, you know, type of designation.
Yeah, that's
versus
pretty good. I think I was more thinking about extensions, to be honest, and that's something else. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
But I think for like you're saying, for the POC side of things, that we may, like, you have experimental at that level, like where we're trying out a new, like, for example, the deployment, a deploy vocabulary that may fall under an experimental part of the POC type of world.
Right. Yeah. And I think for the spec, I have one bullet point underneath. It's from rough towards B01. But maybe we can have a general discussion, I don't know if today, about how we want to handle versioning, what it means to a certain version number, and what kind of stability we provide. So,
like, well, you know, you start at like version 12 because everybody will take you seriously then. Nobody says you have to start at 0.
We could start at the version. Let me know. Okay. We have some code that we wrote for the POC, some adapters for Captain, and also an experimental controller for Tecton. Do we want to gather those into our organization, or leave them, try to maybe move them into the target organization? I mean, the Tecton one is already on the Tecton CD. The Captain adapters are under Mauricio's own account right now. We don't have to decide today. It was just, just wanted to bring it up, and if someone has ideas, we can discuss.
For this, I feel like as a user, it makes more sense if it's inside the same like repo for CD events. So inside maybe like experimental, someone can come and check out the POC, and then, you know, all of the information for that that adapter code.
Yeah. Also, it could be good to have it collected, because currently it is a little bit of a kind of like I don't know, a cumbersomeness, is that when you're trying to set up the POC, you need to download these ones separately. So it could be, for example, that I think it would be good that everything in the POC is collected at once, because I did actually run into an occasion when I had I had a pack up and running, but then I had to redo some things and it didn't work.
Yeah, it makes sense. The only downside of bringing everything together might be over time that the experimental becomes a huge repo to download. But I think we are not quite there yet. So it's something we can consider for the future.
On the Tecton side, how did with the catalog and the Tecton hub, is that bringing in like tasks and pipelines from different organizations? So if let's say from the Ortiz side, if I wanted to contribute something, would I contribute into that repo, or would I have my own repo where people would go get it? You know, how's the organization kind of handled when we start having more outside people contributing to this, that you found it makes the easiest?
Right, so for task on Tecton side, we have different level of support, if you will. So there are some of the tasks that are supported by the Tecton community, and they provide like automated testing, so that it's verified. Other tasks in the catalog, they can be contributed by anyone, and depending on how the level of commitment. So if they set up the same level of CI and testing, then they get the same level of kind of validation as the community wants. And you can also have tasks in outside repos. So the hub technically supports displaying tasks from multiple catalogs. So the catalog is a Git repo, and the hub is the web interface, and the web interface is that you can configure it to pull tasks from multiple repos. So today it only pulls tasks from one repo, but yeah, it could pull from more repos in future. Or if you have your organization and you have your own hub, then you can collate tasks from how many catalogs as you want.
Okay.
So what you're thinking, we could have kind of a catalog of adapters or so?
That's what I'm kind of thinking, that it's kind of falling into that. It feels like that right now. I think we need to flesh it out more, but it feels kind of that we'd have a catalog, because, you know, if, for example, if somebody wants to find some events around security, that they would be able to go to the catalog and find out what adapters are out there that implement security, the security vocabulary, so they can either use that example or bring those in to their pipeline, for example. You know, so it's just an easy way to find things is what I'm thinking about down the road. Like you said, we don't have to decide these today, but that's kind of what it looks like to me from this point of view right now.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it makes sense to have at least one central place to discover all these things, like you said. So you want to use a certain type of events, and you want to see where you have adapters for. In terms of actually storing the codes, having one central repo might have some organizational issues, I think, because then you have approvers for that repo, and but it depends how you set things up. But yeah, we can solve that as we go.
I mean, as long as it's easy to use it, it's not a problem. But currently, as the POC is, you need to clone three different repositories to a certain path. So it's kind of like if there is an install or something, then you can have different repos, but it's more for, you know, ease of doing something.
Yeah. We could add some automation into the BSE, or we could even try to make the current script more like a framework, so you can decide which parts you want to pull in. But yeah, that would be some extra work. But I think it's fine to start with the an experimental repo in the org, and we could pull the code in there. And at least we have a starting point where we have everything related to the BSE in one place.
Yeah. I don't know if we should mention it here or not, but I've seen that the cloud events, actually in their spec, they have something called the cloud events primer, which is a little bit of history around the whole thing. So if you want to have some, it seems like they are capturing back thoughts about how they were thinking when creating the cloud event spec. That's might be something for us to think of.
Yeah. It's a good point. Is that in the spec repo you said?
Yeah, I can post the link here.
Yeah, I guess it's good to capture why we took certain decisions. Otherwise. Nice. Are you mentioning this, Matthias, because you want to start a draft of our right now?
Yeah, well, I've come across it sometimes when I read it, so I wanted to mention it. But yeah, well, if I got the time, I could, but I won't promise anything.
Sure. Sorry, I just. Okay, but yeah, thanks for the reference. All right, anything else on the new org? Or repos?
Nope, looks like a good start.
Sorry, Steve, I missed.
I just said it just looks like a good start.
Oh, okay. Cool. If folks wants to be added to the org, feel free to sign yourself in or send me a message with your email if you don't want your email to be written in here. I'll make sure everyone is added to the org.
You just need the email?
Yeah, the email that you use for GitHub, so I can invite. All right. The other thing then we discussed during the last kind of work SIG meeting about Jenkins and CD events. and Tecton, possible POCs. And so I wanted to discuss this today. So Shruti joined the meeting. So maybe we can have a discussion on these and make plans for a potential POC that would involve Jenkins as well, similar to the one that we have done with Tecton and Captain.
Yes.
And
Sorry, go ahead.
And yeah, so I think one thing that I want to capture here is what kind of events does Jenkins set, and how does this match to existing CD events and the buckets that we have, so we can get an idea of what type of work we need to do, whether we need to make some changes to the existing vocabulary, add more events to match what we need. And yeah.
Yes, so let me share the link to the repository with all of the events, and I can also share my screen and walk through the events which are currently supported.
Yeah, sure.
So at the moment, and this is also, this is participating in Hacktoberfest, and there is an issue to add more sort of like events which are supported in like the pipeline, but as a whole, the current supported are queue events. So when a job is entering the queue, or when a job has left the queue. So again, this is like a single job existing by itself. There's some build events for when a job has started or it has completed or it's in the finalized state. And I think this was more, so when we were picking up events on what to choose, I think what came into mind was the more relevant events, which would make like designing systems on top of each other more easy. So, you know, if a job has completed, you would ideally want to trigger something else in a different CD system, or when a job has finalized, or if a job. So the finalized event also sends an event if the job has failed. So the finalized would be sent out if the job has completed, but it is failed. And
sorry, what is the event, the difference between the finished and, sorry, completed and finalized?
Yeah, so completed will be sent out when they're basically like two stages. So the event completed is only sent out when it's successful, and finalized will be sent out like either way, if a build is successful or if a build has failed or if it's still in the pending stage.
Okay.
Yes, and then failed is being sent separately as well. So for example, if someone is, they have a job and the job was built, but they only really want the fail event, they do not care when it ended, they really only want the fail. So that's when this event, like the failed, will be sent. But if they also want to know the time between the event being completing, or like that particular job completing and the job failing, that's when they would want to use finalized. So it's a tiny bit of a difference, and I think we need to make it, like, I need to add some more detail on the difference. That's a really good point. And then there's the job event for if a new job was created or updated and possibly like deleted, and the node events for when a node is online and when a node is offline. And there are some more node events for, you know, like an agent is, let's say, like added to a queue, or if an agent is in the waiting stage, and all of that stuff like that. But right now, these are the events which are supported, and moving into like the future of maybe like a month or so, there is a plan to add more pipeline events. So when something is moving between stage of a pipeline, so from one stage to another stage, or when one stage has failed. So that's going to be a bit different than individual events. But stop my share so you can go ahead and share if you want.
All right. Thanks. So I think we don't have matching events for all the events in here. But I guess, let me check I think mainly the queue with job events would match the kind of core category where we have kind of pipeline started, pipeline completed, or this kind of events.
Wasn't it pipeline, job, and build events?
Yeah, but
I think, task probably.
Yeah. Pipeline, task. I think task maybe would correspond to the stage once they become available. But the three events that we have are pipeline, run, queued, started, and finished. So I guess the QEnter would be the queued one. I'm not sure when the leaving queue event is generated. Is that once the job is completed, surely? Or?
Yeah, so I would say that would go into more like the finished in a queue. So when a job was in a queue and then it left the queue, and then when it leaves the queue, that's when the job will start building.
Oh, I see. Okay. So basically, QEnter would be pipeline queued, and queue leave would be basically the pipeline start, because it starts executing. And I guess we don't have anything for the completed or failed, but the finalized would be the pipeline finished one, which is sent. In any case, it will contain the result.
Yes.
In terms of job created and deleted, so this is about the definition of the job itself, right? So create a new project and define the new job and so forth. Okay.
Yes.
I don't think we have anything like that.
No. But we should probably mention something in the continuous integration events. We have build queued, build started, and build finished.
Yeah, even though these jobs might not be CI specific, in fact, so they could be for CD pipeline.
However, said there, can you send both events? I'm trying to remember when we were supposed to use the build events.
Yeah, I think build events are specific to a job, which is a build, so that creates an artifact. And so after a build, we send like artifact published or artifact packaged events as well. I think that was the idea.
Yeah, I do agree with that, and we can implement that in Jenkins, but I don't think that's going to work for all jobs, because there obviously are some jobs where someone might want to build and publish an artifact. So that can be a possibility of implementing that event inside of Jenkins, but it might become a bit hard to figure out when exactly would we want to trigger that.
All right, so the way we did that in Tecton, if we wanted to have extra kind of events, we use some metadata on the job definition. So in the case of Tecton in the pipeline, we put some annotation so that if the annotation is set and certain results are produced, then the Tecton controller uses that information to send the specific events. Because the other thing is that if you send an event, for instance, that requires an artifact ID, well, it's an optional attribute, but if you want to send an artifact ID, you need to be able to understand where to take that artifact ID from. So it's a similar kind of problem that we have on Jenkins side, because Jenkins is kind of high level pipeline orchestrator in this sense. So it's not.
So basically, we should state in recommendation that these events should be sent specifically for the job, but the other ones could be, for example, implemented by plugin because they're more general. If you're following my thoughts.
Yeah, so let's see for events. Okay, let's from the core bucket can be sent by the plugin. More specific events could be sent by the job. Yeah, that's a possibility. I mean, the jobs could send the events directly. Or yeah, you could have some facility in the plugin so that if you specify a certain attribute in your job, then the plugin will send the event for you. But
we can also offload this to the user who is configuring that particular sync, since that's how it's very like UI based at the moment. What events would the sync like to receive and then act upon? So the user can maybe select, I also want to send build events for, you know, my job is also building artifacts and publishing. But I'm not sure if it might make it easy or hard for the users, because it might be a bit difficult to figure out the difference between like build events or build like events or jobs which are building an artifact versus just plain jobs.
yeah, I guess if you know what you're doing, you could select the extra events, but it could be optional. But yeah, I think it would make sense, and certainly would help. It might help with the POC at least to have this this kind of events sent. It makes it easier for integration, like in the Tecton plus Captain POC sends an event about an artifact being packaged. if we only send the pipeline finished event, I mean, that could be any pipeline, and it would be difficult on captain side to take a decision what to do based on that.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Definitely thinking of offloading it to the user itself.
Good. For node type of events, I think that might be, we have something in the maybe continuous deployment environment created. I guess we could it's a test environment, basically, a node in a way.
So like environment here would be more like what's generating, creating, and testing, because node in Jenkins is more related to actual infrastructure. So I'm not sure if they might match. I think they're quite different events.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's where you execute your build and not where you can deploy to. Yeah, you're right. That's a different. Well, we could. Yeah,
wasn't it our idea with that one also to have where you execute? I thought it was, at least we had some, I guess when you're running your tests, you want to have the environment where you run it. But maybe that is not exactly corresponding to Node, but I guess you could use it, in my head at least.
Yeah. I sure do.
I do see that point. Because like, you know, and whenever someone would want to have a special sort of testing environment for their job, they might create a node and add additional capabilities to it. Yeah, I think that's something that I might need to look a bit more and ask the Jenkins community who's more familiar with environments and like Node. But that can, as Matthias said, that is true. That they're in a way that's both executing something.
Right.
And from a deployment perspective, you may have a step in your process that would be doing some Terraform to stand up a Kubernetes cluster, and Kubernetes would be more like standing up Kubernetes from an infrastructure level would be kind of related to a node event.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it aligns more with infrastructure and like starting up or tearing down an infrastructure than very clear alignment with environments. But I'm sure that it is something that Jenkins maybe just in some different architecture, but again, you might need to ask the community about it.
Yeah, in our world, the Artilius world, we call them endpoints, but nodes are belong to an environment. So you'd have you know, a database server, you'd have your Kubernetes cluster, and then you may have some Lambda functions that make up the QA environment. And those are all going to be part of different types of, I want to say, like for lack of a better word, appliances that live in the environment that we have to make sure they're up and going.
That makes sense.
So I think it makes sense maybe to have some discussion around on this kind of events or CD events as well. So maybe what I can do, I can create an issue or a discussion, and then we can continue the discussion there on this specific topic and see if we want to add some events to the spec. Yeah, I don't think they would be vital for initial POCs. So I think it should be okay if we don't have support for node events right away.
Yeah, I don't mind either way, but it's still I like creating and maybe figuring out that environment issue. I think that's a good idea.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you, Andrea.
Where do we go from here? So do you think this is something you could be working on, surely, and like starting to look at implementing some of these events, or is that something that you would not be able to work on?
Yes, no, I'll definitely start working on these. And I also pull in some more people who are familiar with the entire Jenkins ecosystem, and they might be able to help out as well in the terminology and the differences between, you know, Jenkins and other CI/CD, especially like Tecton, since we're using that for the POC.
Okay. So shall we keep this meeting like as a syncing point to see if there is anything that needs to be discussed? And we can also interact via Slack if there is anything more urgent to discuss.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Anything else on this?
I think we're good for now.
Great. We only have a few minutes left. Do we want to get back on the discussion in terms of the format for the spec and the generating SDK code? Or anything else folks would like to bring up?
There might be some background noise from my side. I apologize for that, but I went through all what I consider open discussions and all action points and put them on the wiki. We definitely don't want to go through perhaps any of them today, but most likely some of those discussions or some of those actions are pretty close to being done. And what I would propose is that we, as sort of a standing bullet for future meetings, we try to look into whatever discussions we think are either important or soon to be closed or can be easily closed, just so we can basically shorten down the backlog a bit.
Yeah, it makes sense. So let me All right, shall we start to go through those?
I think that might take too much time. But I think if you look at, there might be one bullet actually, if we look at it, that I think I documented some discussion as basically just needing a formal decision. It seems like everyone is in agreement, but I'm just not sure about the decision. Let's see if I can actually remember which one that is. I hope I noted it out in the wiki text itself. Let me look for a second.
Maybe when we look through these, if there's some way on the wiki page, we could just color code or tag the ones we think that are close, just to make things easier to find again.
Yeah, that would be a good point. In fact, I think it's the first one. It's one of the ones that seems to be really close to at least partial decision. We were talking about generic versus concrete activity events, and I think everyone seems to be in favor of having generic activity events. What is not clear to me is, do we only have generic activity events, or do we also have concrete activity events? That we don't need to solve it now, as I said, but I mean, answering that as well would make this a complete decision rather than half a decision in some sense.
Yeah, personally, I think we need to have concrete activity events as well, and that's, I think, an area where we gain a lot of value by having this shared vocabulary, because especially the concrete activity events is probably where you get a lot of plethora of different names in different systems. And if we can, at least in this place, have one name which is explained with a clear semantic, and so there will be adaptation layers needed for the different platforms to converge to those names. But then, at least if you receive an event, a CD event that talks about a test or a build, you know what is meant with that, and then you can take an action on that. Whether if you only get events about task and generic task and pipelines. I think that's useful if you want to display the progress of a pipeline, or of your workflow made of multiple tasks or pipelines, or if you want to build metrics about how many pipelines you executed and so forth. But if you want to take an action as a reaction to that event, you need to have some more information, some more concrete information about what happens.
Yeah, I agree. I think when we talk about the concrete events, I think it's going to be helpful in the long run. But also, I think we're going to end up needing for a translation matrix. So this is from the spec side, this is the definition of the concrete event. Now in Jenkins, you know, just like we had the conversation about what a node is, you know, so a node in the spec is defined as this. In Jenkins, it maps one-to-one. In Tecton, it maps to something else. And in like Ortelius, it's a map to something else. I think we're going to need a matrix that kind of helps people digest, or a way to bring things into their frame of reference. Does that make sense? Because we have so many different namings for the same thing.
Yeah, that's a really good idea, because that is what sort of is the goal for this, like standardizing events and defining that vocabulary. So I think that translation metrics might be really helpful in that case.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we started to collect some of those names. So yeah, we should keep those in a document nicely in a nice table. All right. So we are at time. We have a bit of a hard cut. I have another meeting coming up. So I would leave the meeting for now. I don't know if folks want to continue the discussion.
I have to drop off as well, so.
All right.
I think we could continue the discussion in the actual discussion if we want to in GitHub. So that might be a good way of doing it.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah,
thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone, for joining today. Good to see you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.